The next lesson, we're on lesson 4. We're looking at grouping and sorting, figuring out how to take really complex big raw data sets and condense even more the data into useful insights. You can click on the tutorial. It will open up a notebook, Kaggle notebook, which you can then copy into your own account, just like I did here, similar to all the previous videos. First thing we'll talk about is a function called group by. And group by is an operation that allows you to look at certain columns and aggregate, once again, another way of aggregating the data according to the categories, potentially categories in that column. So let's look at a few examples to see what we're talking about. First off, I'll load the data set and Pandas library. If you remember from the last lesson, we talked about value underscore counts as a great way of taking a certain column and finding basically the unique, let's say, categories in that column, and then also the number of instances of those categories. We can recreate the value underscore counts using group by. Basically, let's go ahead and add a line of code here just to refresh our memory of what the reviews data frame looks like. So here you can see it's these wine reviews. You have all these different columns, and the column that we're interested in is the points column. We want to figure out how many wines what are the different wine point totals are there, and how many wines fit into that point total. So here we have a line of code where we're using the group by function to group based on point totals. We're chaining that with the points column, and finally using the count function to get the number of times that each of these happen. So if we execute that, we're only going to see the top, basically the top and bottom here of the series that's resultant. So wine reviews with a point total of 80 happen 397 times. 100 perfect score only happens 19 times. And there's a bunch in between here that you can see. There's a length of 21. So there's 21 different scores that are possible in the point totals. And this is the number that comes out here. We've reverse engineered this value counts function by using group by. So group by created a group of reviews, which allotted the same point value. Then for each of the groups, we grabbed the points column and counted how many times it appeared. So you can see that group by is interesting. You can recreate value counts, but you can also have some flexibility in other things you can do. So let's try to do the same thing. Let's figure out if we group by points and we look at the price column, what is the minimum price in the price column according to the different categories in the points column. So this is cool because it's saying, okay, out of any wine that is worth 80 points, what is the minimum price you can get that bottle of wine for? So $5 for wine reviews that are at 80 points. 100 points, perfect score. The cheapest bottle of wine you can find in there is $80. You can see here that this is really powerful when you're looking through a big, crazy data set, how you can extract different types of insight. Group by can also be used with the .apply function. If you remember, we learned about .apply earlier, where it is using what's called a lambda function to apply some sort of something to a subset of data. In this case, it's going to be these categories that come out of the group by function. So if we run this line of code, the code is looking at the data set and selecting the name of the first wine reviewed from each winery in the data set. Selecting the name of the first wine reviewed from each winery in the data set. So if we look at the code, it's grouping by winery. So it's getting each of the vineyards that are in the data set. And it is basically applying and finding within each of those groups, which is the title that comes first. What is the location of the first title? So this is a situation where Pandas and Python, the syntax of it is obviously much different than speaking English, but you can, once you get a sense of what these functions do, you can convert this type of thing into code in this way. Another cool part about group by is that you can group by more than one column. So here we're going to group by both country and province. and we're going to find the best wine based on point totals. So that's the lambda function here, the best wine for country and province. So here you can see the output of this is for Argentina, you have the Mendoza province. It's finding basically the top highest point wine review here, which is 97 points. If we scroll down to the end, Uruguay, San Jose, 87 points is the best wine from there. You can also aggregate using group by. So here we can see a situation where you're grouping by country, and then you're taking the price column after you've grouped by, and you're finding the length, the minimum and maximum according to price. So here for Argentina, you have 3,800 different instances of reviews that have a price. The minimum price is $4. The maximum price is $230. So you can see how powerful this is. You're really figuring out ways to aggregate. And if you worked in a spreadsheet, you'd usually have some sort of total or aggregator cell at the bottom or off to the side. That's what we're doing here with these group by functions. So one concept that comes hand in hand with group by is multi-indices, which is a more complex concept, which I use not so often, but it is useful when you want to use it. What multi-index means is that you have a group by, for example, country and province, where Argentina becomes the main index, Mendoza becomes a secondary index. And you can query those indices individually, and you can sort individually, and you can do various things to it. I won't go into tons of detail about this because it's something that's not happening super often. Here you can see that we're figuring out what is the type of this object, which is called multi-index. I recommend if you become more comfortable with pandas, you'll start to use this, but in the beginning phases, and anytime you have a multi-index, you can use the .reset index to get it back to a single index. It basically gets rid of the index and just replaces it with integer-based simplified index. So now we move on to the portion where we're talking about sorting. Of course, when you use group by to extract these different things from your big raw data sets, for example, countries reviewed is a data set up here that we've done to get our country, province, and basically the number of points in there, or number of instances of those things. We can use a function called sort values to sort from top to bottom, in this case from 1 to 36,000 by LEN, which is one of the columns in this data frame. So you're sorting this data frame in that column according to this column length. So this is very similar to in a spreadsheet where you're using sorting depending on the column. By default, it's ascending order. If you want to do descending order, you just change the attribute within this function to ascending equals false. So that's a Boolean value. So true is default and false is what we're setting it to here. And you can see that now California is at the top of the list that has the most number of instances of wine reviews. This small province in Greece only has one, and that's why it's at the bottom of the list. You can sort on the index. So in this case, the index is an integer. So that's pretty straightforward. So 0 to 424. And you can sort more than one column at a time. So you want to sort by country and then by length. You can do that using sort value. So super handy, very similar to what you could probably do in a spreadsheet in a sense, but using Python.